Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the craziest rule or punishment you had to deal with? My mother is a malignant narcissist, obligatory plug to r/ray said bin narcissists, so the rules in my childhood home went from bad to straight up disturbing. Could only shower twice a week. We lived on a pig farm. I loathed that rule. Had to wear my clothes at least 2 to 3 days in a row, regardless of playing outside, working or getting dirty. School was not fun, but I did get in a system where I wore different clothes underneath and shared the outer layers on the bus. Eventually in my later teens she slightly loosened this rule. No phone calls. If my friends ever called I almost always had to say I will see you at school and hang up. Clean your plate rule. I wouldn't give a dog what my mother cooked. If I wasn't finished my meal first she would grab my chair and throw it across the room. I then had to take my plate and go to the chair to finish my meal. I never stood a chance. My siblings could inhale a buffet like a shop vac, and she always gave them whatever portions looked the most appetizing first. They were of course allowed to belittle me when this happened. If I wasn't the first person in the kitchen in the morning to set up breakfast I would have to take my clothes off and eat naked while everyone else ridiculed me. My father worked 16 hours a day on the farm and wasn't around for most of this. When he saw it one day he put an immediate stop to it. Damage was done though. Again, the game was rigged for me to lose. I had severe insomnia for years, laying awake every night for hours going over and over about whatever crap sheet had happened that day and how to fight the next crazy storm coming. I could never wake up in the mornings and just bound out of bed. We were not allowed to set our own alarm clocks, so as soon as the signal went off the rest were already halfway down the stairs. Before I even realized what was going on. I was not allowed to watch the endings of TV shows/movies, and what we watched was strictly controlled. This is one that actually left huge mental scars for years. It may seem petty, but it's also been well proven that children grow much more attached to a storyline in TV/films than adults do. I need to know how that last plot twist ends, even if to an adult it is cheesy and predictable. My mother knew this and would always barge into the den at the cliffhanger commercial break and turn off the TV. It was a form of hijacking information to deliberately keep me confused and reinforcing her absolute control over every aspect of my life. To this day I find TV shows I watched as a child and binge the series just to see how each episode ends. Ridiculous timings to complete a lengthy list of chores. I would have 20 minutes to get the house clean, dishes washed/dried/put away by hand, vacuum, dust, sweep, laundry started and bathrooms cleaned. Not being done meant a beating, and even worse was that I was not allowed to go back and finish it afterwards. Our house always looked like half a pig pen. Drove me nuts. No using the dryer for laundry unless it was below freezing outside. This was in central Canada. Also on that note, not turning on the heat at night, even in the dead of February, in faking central Canada. She gave my siblings electric heating blankets. I was told to shut up. Our house was very old and hardly insulated. I now live in a temperate climate where there is no winter. My mother would frequently sign me up for clubs and activities and refuse to take me to them in the car. We lived at least 10 miles from anywhere, and the vehicle's gas usage was a business tax write-off for the farm. She would yell at me to call the other kids in the group for a ride, which was not an option as I either didn't have a clue who the hell was in the group, and if it was any of my classmates they all hated me. There was no way I could call and beg for rides from my very out of the way location. Made me get a summer job when I was 8, picking rocks out of neighbors' crop fields before the planting was done. Technically it paid $50/W, which is richer than Bill Gates when you're 8, but I wasn't allowed to have my money. I have worked at least a part-time job since I was 12. By 13 I had to buy my own clothes, school supplies, field trips and summer camps, which she would also sign me up for, and then give me a bill for the cost, because you're working now so learn to pay for it. She also forced me to sign up for a possible year-long exchange student program in Europe, and insisted I pay for entirely myself. It was $6,000, which I didn't have even a fraction of, and she would have certainly made me pay it, or forced me into a loan with her with unimaginable strings attached. Thankfully I signed up too late and was denied. A year later she paid for my brother to go on the same exchange point. None of this includes the daily battles just to get anything done, the fights that were created out of thin air, arbitrary things being turned into WW3, the constant stress of knowing the next battle is coming soon. I had the shock of my life when I moved out, and it was 100x easier. Not saying things went smoothly, they certainly didn't, but not having a raging control freak over your shoulder makes everything much easier. I left at 17, never went back. I'm on VLC very low contact right now, and it's working well. Edit. Obligatory. RIP my inbox. This totally blew up. Info for those interested. My mother has narcissistic personality disorder. One of the behaviors people with NPD displays, that they pick one child as a scapegoat gets the blame for everything, and another child as the golden child can do no wrong. I was not the golden child. I have not included the worst of it in this description. It took years of therapy to deal with this all, but I'm fully able to talk about it, and I believe in education and awareness that mothers can be abusers too. Edit #2. Okay, I have to go to bed now. It's midnight here, and early call-in tomorrow. I will try and respond to all of you soon. Edit #3. Wow, thank you all for your replies and your support. I will do my best to get back to everyone throughout the day. RIP my inbox. Again, for those who are requesting an update, my father is a great man, still works 16 hours a day on the farm. My narc mother was sure to keep the worst of her behavior hidden from him, so he never witnessed with really bad stuff. He is hard to contact as he is not tech savvy. I did make a brief visit last year to see him, and he did reveal he knows something is off about her. They may be legally married, but they do not live in the same parts of the house. It's more like roommates. He will never, or leave/kick her out, because she would take him to the cleaners and ruin his life's work and legacy. She hardly helps out, and when she does it's the bare minimum. Relationship with my siblings, almost non-existent. My brother and I have nothing in common. He has been so ingrained with treating me like crap that I believe he is hardly aware of how mean and condescending he is when he speaks to me. Having a conversation is impossible because it just turns into him listing off a dozen ways he would improve everything I do, whether I want to know or not. It's hard to counter any arguments he makes as he has a near genius IQ and was teaching computer science at our local college when he was 14. On the rare occasion we are in the same room, it feels like he is a total stranger to me. With my sister it's slightly better. She really grew into her own person after she left for college and was on her own. She has found happiness and success in her life and I'm very proud of her. It is still strained in the sense that she still plays a role of the good kid and stays on script so as not to risk being swapped with my position as scapegoat. We all know my brother is untouchable up on his pedestal, but that rule does not apply to the girls. As for my mother, I'm too busy living my amazing life, with a great career and fantastic friends, to worry about what she just up to. It did take me a few years of therapy to work through the after effects. Mostly her grooming and conditioning of me left me prime for being plucked by manipulative and abusive men. After a few train wrecks in that department I went to some intensive counseling and broke the cycle. It was a difficult process, but very worth it. For me, now, seeing that my mother will never have joy in her life, is what makes it sad. I almost pity her, because she will never know that feeling. Almost. To anyone experiencing abuse in any form, please know it is not your fault, and reach out to any resources you may have. Breaking the cycle is worth it, because you are worth it. Oh. One I can answer. My mother is an honest to God narcissist. I graduated from high school early at 16 and didn't go to college immediately, so I worked a part-time job while all my friends went to school. Anyways, when all my friends graduated high school we celebrated by going to the movies. My friend's mom dropped us off and another friend's father was going to be picking us up. My mom was very upset at me going to the movies anyways, since it wasn't going to be over until after 9 PM, by bedtime at the time. Anyways, finally she lets me go on the condition that friend's dad gets me home by 10 PM. My friend's father ran into late night construction on the way home with me and several other friends in the van, and the closer it got to 10 PM the more I started freaking out, telling everyone I was going to be in huge trouble if I didn't get home like right now. My friend's father assured me he would speak to my mom and all would be fine. I was the first BB dropped off because I was panicking so severely. The moment the van pulls into the driveway, my mom comes barreling out of the house telling me she was going to kick my ass for being late and keeping her up. My friend's dad tries to calm her down and separate her from hitting me. That is when she realizes I'm chewing gum. Now my mother hated gum. Said the only reason you would ever chew gum was to hide something. So naturally she makes the assumption that I was late / chewing gum because I was busy sucking my friend's dad's dick. Yup. That was the only explanation in her mind. She grounded me for 12 weeks. An entire summer. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, cell phone, TV or books the entire summer. Every morning my mom would take the cable box, home phone handset, and keyboard to make sure I couldn't do anything. Needless to say, my friends never invited me anywhere again in fear that my mom would call the cops and accuse me of sucking their dad's dick. She also used to report my car stolen if I didn't call her back when I was in college. I had all the usual punishments: no video games for a week, no TV for X nights, no pocket money this week, groundings, you name it. I probably had it at one point or another. One particular punishment tops the rest though, for creativity and cruelty. One day I was at a friend's place with my parents and discovered that if we opened his bedroom window all the way, we could squeeze out of it and climb onto his roof. His bedroom was on the second floor of their house and they lived on top of a hill. So if we had fallen, we would have fallen probably 7 to 8 meters, then tumbled another 20 to 30 meters to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, both sets of parents walk outside at one point and hear us talking from the roof. They flip their lids and call us back inside. We scramble back into his bedroom and are sitting there terrified when our parents storm in. We get called down into the kitchen and are told to sit down at the kitchen table and await our punishment. My friend's dad opens up the pantry and starts pulling things out, things to make a sandwich. Then it hits us like a ton of bricks. Our punishment is to eat a sandwich made of the most ill-complementing, grotesque food combinations that he had at his disposal. The final product ended up being an unholy blend of Vegemite, oysters, anchovies, cheese, creamed corn, raw beef mince, and hot English mustard. I actually don't really recall what it tasted like, other than being awful. Looking back on it as an adult, I reckon it was just as much for their entertainment than our punishment, but damn if it wasn't creative. I have a literal book worth of stories of the abuse I survived through, but one time Dr. Phil's show told my mother that having a bed was a luxury for kids, so she immediately took mine away. I slept on a cold wood floor until I escaped that hellhole and cut off all contact. My dorm in college was the first real bed I'd slept in for 10 years. I didn't own a bed when I moved into my first apartment after college, so I was back on the wood floor. I'd moved in with the clothes on my back, my cat and her stuff, and my laptop, which I used to make money by transcribing at night while I worked for 7 an hour 12 hours a week at a deli. It was the only place that would hire me. Since I didn't have access to my own car, I cried myself to sleep every night on that wood floor. It was a reminder of how much I'd failed, leaving myself back in that position. My roommate must have heard me crying one night and figured it was back pain because they lent me an air mattress to sleep on. It was like I'd moved into a 4-star hotel. Eventually I saved up a spare $50 and bought a bed off Craigslist. Sketchy, but I hadn't owned my own bed in 16 years before that. I still have the bed and refuse to part with it because I don't want to end up on the floor again. I have many chronic back problems that I don't think will ever be fixed due to being forced to sleep on a floor starting at age 7. I take pain meds when I can and do yoga, but it does not help. Sometimes when I can't sleep in my normal bed, I find myself still defaulting to the floor. When I wake up I cry because I'm worried I'll always be like this. Parents have no idea how much they can fuck up their kids. Note, most of these only applied to me, the oldest daughter. The rules for my sister were much more lenient. My childhood was riddled with household commandments. Here are some of my personal favorites. If you slammed/locked a door, my stepdad would take your bedroom door off the hinges, removing your bedroom door privileges. In a similar vein, it wasn't your room, it was his room, that we were just using. Point. If you were old enough to have email privileges, all emails were fair game for parents to read. Same goes for phone messages and Facebook. Also, no laptops/emails/phone/Facebook until you're at least 16. I wasn't allowed to message people in Japanese because my mom couldn't understand it and was therefore convinced anything I sent in Japanese was something negative about her. I couldn't even message anything in Japanese to study for my Japanese class. Absolutely no exceptions. When my sister began studying Japanese too, Japanese was no longer allowed to be spoken in the house. If you had a personal computer, desktop, not the laptop, then all of your keystrokes were monitored using some program. Parents knew everything you typed, every website you visited. Curfew was 11 p.m. for me until I was 21. Now I'm 23 and have moved out, and when I go home to visit, my curfew is still midnight. Until senior year of high school, bedtime was 9:30 p.m. Sunday Thursday. Strictly enforced. 3 hours of TV a week until 8th grade. Mom/sister could use any shoe/clothes they wanted from my closet anytime they wanted to. Permission not required. I, however, was not allowed to wear anything belonging to them. No going into my mother's room. No using the bathroom in the basement. No saying never and always, because nothing is never or always. My parents saw these words as exaggeration. For example, if I say something like man, we always have chicken for dinner, I would be reprimanded/grounded. No bringing up things that happened in the past. For example, we would be sent to our rooms indefinitely if we said something like I'm still angry about that thing you did 2 weeks ago. I could deal with all of this, but the one rule that really faked me up long term was the diary/journal rule. If we kept a diary/journal/any kind of notebook with anything remotely personal written in it, our mother would take it from us and read it. And then, she would leave us notes in it to let us know she had seen it. She would give feedback. She would punish us for things written in our diaries. Her justification was, reading them was her right as a parent, and her way of keeping us safe. I was sneaky with my diaries. I would hide them expertly. I would keep 2 or 3 decoy journals to throw her off of my real diary's trail. When she found the decoys, I would throw them out and craft new ones. I would take the real one to school and work with me. I needed my real diary because it was the only place I could freely express myself, so simply not keeping one was out of the question. It was on my person at all times. And then one day in high school, while I took a shower, my mom went snooping. She found the real one in the middle of my mattress. She took it, read it, saw where I had expressed my frustrations about her and life and about wanting to die. She then screamed at me and kicked me out for 2 nights as punishment for writing such horrible things. Bleh. That felt good to get out of my system. Lol. Not that crazy, just something that stuck with me, since I generally consider my parents to be good/caring parents, mainly just overprotective. But when I was 15, I got really depressed and kinda shut down academically and socially. My parents didn't know what to do with me. At one point, they ran out of ways to ground me, and my life was consequently made up of just going to school and coming home and lying motionless in bed, staring at the wall or sleeping. But my grades still hadn't improved, so they thought denying me of privacy/solitude by taking away my bedroom door would persuade me to get my grades up. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Did it. I feel like I should address the sentiment in some of the responses that my parents weren't good at parenting. They really are good parents, and we have a much better relationship now. I'm 20 and in college in another state. Before this, they'd tried for months to figure out what was going on with me and how to fix it with more compassionate, pretty typical methods. They really did want to help me get back on track, but my depression manifested primarily as a sullen silence and a passive refusal to do homework, study, do chores, etc. I think the combination of my attitude, refusal to engage, and an oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis from a therapist, who I still believe was biased in favor of my parents in this conflict, Considering how she spoke to me, and the fact that she brought up her relationship with her kids a few times during our meetings, led them to believe that I just hated them and wanted to hurt them emotionally. I mainly just wanted to be left alone for the most part. We've moved past that year, as it was hard on all of us, and I view this incident primarily as a mistake made during a difficult time by otherwise very loving parents. No talking at the dinner table other than the occasional "do you want some more of" or "please pass the." We could not talk about anything at all. No small/idle chat was allowed. First time you did it, you got yelled at. Second time was a whooping and then sent to your room until the next day without the rest of your meal. I make it a point now with my kids to chat up a storm each and every meal. Edit. After viewing the replies and reading various PMs, I'll answer what I can. It was my dad's rule to not talk at the table. I think this was because he grew up in a very large farming family, 11 boys, 3 girls and 2 adults. Having to feed a family that size 3 meals a day was likely very time consuming, and with this being a farm there was work to do, so the faster the gang got done eating, the more work could be done. This was back in the late 40s early 50s era. I believe it was a carryover from that. He did loosen up later, when he got to be 50 plus, and to out how the 3 of us kids were 20 plus. Meal times for my family are hugely social times, especially dinner/supper, as that's when we aren't pressed for time. We talk about whatever comes to mind. We laugh, joke and just talk, and even have the occasional food tossing at one another. I rarely limit discussions, unless it's obvious that my kids are not eating. Usually a gentle reminder to have a bite or two gets the desired result. After we eat, each person then takes their dishes to the sink, and then we usually all flop on the couch to continue any bits of conversation we think weren't covered. Working shift work though does put a damper on it sometimes. My mom was raised in a very strict and abusive environment. When my sister and I became teenagers, she was struggling with mental health issues and also never had a good example of what level-headed parenting looked like. It doesn't excuse some of the things she did, but I'm more understanding now that I'm older anyway. Craziest, most out of hand moment. My sister and I are 16 months apart in age and had a lot of the same friends in high school. When I was 14 and she was 15, our curfew was 9, but we got a summertime curfew of 10. This was before everyone had a cell phone. Our friend was watching the time, but we got caught up in our night games. We were literally playing hide and seek that we lost track of time and realized at 5 after 10 we were late and managed to get home by 10 after. My mom was furious, made us sit down at the kitchen table for a 30-minute lecture during which she slammed a utensil so hard on a plate in front of my sister that glass shards flew in her face. My sister got up and left the room at that point, but when I tried to do the same, my mom put me in a headlock, like freaking WWE style, and I punched her in the back to get her to let go. My sister and I were both grounded for something like 2 weeks, and I got an extra week for hurting my mom. The most ridiculous punishment? My sister at age 16 picked up smoking cigarettes. She'd been at it for a week. I told her that it was her own head, and that it wasn't worth it, and she should stop. But she kept on. Whatever, not my problem. She, like an idiot, pressed her luck and brought cigarettes into the house, where my mom found them in her room. Our mom would go through our stuff constantly, literally had to hide any CD with profanity or things like permanent markers that we could get high off of. They separated us and played good cop, bad cop. My sister, again, the idiot, totally bought it when my mom told her I'd blabbed about everything and they knew the truth. I was in the other room denying any knowledge or involvement. Anyway, this happened a week before summer vacation. My sister was grounded for the entire summer vacation. 2 months, no friends, no going out, 10 minutes of phone time a day, no electronics, no internet, no pool, no movie theater, nothing. My punishment? The exact same faking thing. For not coming to my parents and telling on my sister. My parents also decided to sand and paint the baseboards that summer and forced us to do it all. That summer was the faking worst. I spent a large portion of my teen years being grounded for minor things or for not being the sister spy. It sucked, especially considering I got decent, if not great grades, never drank, smoked, tried drugs, had sex, skipped class, or otherwise got into any kind of trouble. I'm almost 30 and about to have my second kid, and I'm still a little salty about it. My parents tried so hard to keep us from experiencing normal teenage stuff that both me and my sister made some really poor choices once we had the tiniest amount of freedom. My mom was overly involved in my personal life, including friends and relationships. If I used my phone too much throughout evenings, she would confiscate it and read through my texts. I also come from a very conservative Christian family from the Midwest. Had a girlfriend in high school who was half black and half Costa Rican, and that relationship started over the summer when I was 17 and a junior in high school. At the time I was paying for my own car, food, and clothes. I literally stayed at my parents' house, had a flip phone on their phone plan, and occasionally ate food there. I lost my virginity to the girl a few months into the relationship. My mom eventually got suspicious after about a year and a half and asked me one night, _salty_crab, have you had sex with her? Of course I said hell no. She then brought out a faking Bible and asked me to say the same answer, but swearing with my hand on the Bible. I didn't want to let Jesus down and eventually cracked. She tried to cut off all ties to the girl by making it to where I could only drive my car to and from school, work, and other approved places. I saw her every day at school, with friends, etc. If I didn't agree to her rules I would get kicked out and would have nothing but the clothes on my back. My car's title was under my parents' name. This went on for months, which caused hellacious fights between both my mother and girlfriend at the time. It was literally the stupidest faking thing in my life. I finally graduated and decided to get the fuck up out that beach and enlisted in the Navy by making a pros and cons list one night. The girl and I eventually split up after some time, but we tried to make it work for as long as we could under the circumstances. Looking back on it now, I wish I would just moved the hell out, but I was too afraid at the time. My mother was bipolar, eventually killed herself when I was 20 on my sister's 17th birthday, and my stepfather and stepmother were both abusive as holes. I have tons and tons of stories, but I'll stick to one story here so as not to make it too long. I've worn glasses since I was like 7, so I had to get periodic vision tests. When I was 13 or 14, I got one with an automatic machine that determines your prescription. I'm not sure what happened, but the machine definitely faked up. It said I was legally blind and I had to wear thick Coke bottle glasses. I got horrible headaches because it wasn't the right prescription. My mom was fine with giving me meds for my headaches, but she and my stepfather refused to believe me that the prescription was incorrect. My stepfather would ground me anytime he saw me without my glasses on. I kept taking them off when they weren't around because I couldn't see shit. At one point, I was grounded for 9 months straight for taking off my glasses. He would follow me around sometimes, sneaking so I didn't know he was there, just so he could bust me taking them off, which would also lead to spanking me really hard with a ping pong paddle. Did I mention they were ridiculously religious? Well, I'd had enough of the bullshit with the glasses, so when I went to Oral Roberts University for summer camp one year, I devised a plan. When the crazy healing retarded part of the service started, where you can go up and people will pray your affliction away, I went up and had them pray for my eyes. I made sure my youth pastor and several kids in my group witnessed this. The next day I declared my eyes were healed and that I didn't need such strong glasses anymore. My mom and stepfather were very skeptical of this story of healing, so they took me back to the eye doctor. It's a faking miracle. Her eyes are better. It's not perfect, but it's definitely way better than before. Praise Jesus. They had me get up at church and testify 4 or 5 times over the next year so everyone could celebrate my miracle. I finally had the right prescription. My mom wasn't so much strict as she was abusive and psycho. She started beating my ass with a thick wooden stick wrapped in duct tape at a young age. One time I called her dude and she beat the shit out of me. Once, after getting off the phone with my boyfriend, who had just broken up with me, and I was crying, I said none of your business to her when she asked what the hell was wrong. She came running at me, put her hands around my throat, and started choking me, and knocked the chair I was in backwards, so she was on top of me. She continued to choke me, and spit in my face. I was 12. Maybe I shouldn't have talked to her that way, but I think her reaction was a bit strong. One time, a few days before Christmas, she got pissed at my sister and me, threw the decorated Christmas tree down, and locked us out of the house. We were stuck outside for a few hours. She emptied a bottle recipe depression meds, and then went for a drive. My sister and I freaked out, and called the cops. She was just faking with us, and didn't take the drugs. Sheet like this was my life. Until I was 17, and she threw a half-full Pepsi bottle at my head, and then started hitting me in front of friends. I was faking done. I told my friends to get out, because how embarrassing is it to have your mother beat on you in front of them? And then after she punched me a few times, I took 2 swings at her, both of them landing on her jaw. She stopped then, and never hit me again. I'm 36 now, and I couldn't be happier that I live a state away from her. I find myself getting pissed at my son, and there is definitely a little nagging inside me that could almost let the chain of abuse go on, but I just draw from all the times my mom was crazy and how it made me feel as a kid, and I just can't let myself be that way. She definitely did some damage to me. I have a Japanese dad, and he's a stereotypical strict Asian. On top of the normal strict stuff, he's also a strict Christian. I'm not bashing Christians. I'm cool with them, as long as they aren't crazy like he is. So imagine combining Japanese high respect culture with strict Christian principles. It was awful. So I don't want to bore anyone with a common can't see friends, unless planned a week in advance, and all phone numbers of people involved are exchanged, address given, emails exchanged, when emails were popular, home by 6 no matter what. Didn't get a phone until I was a sophomore in high school. I bought it myself. Couldn't wear shorts higher than just above the knee until I was 12. Couldn't wear tank tops if you swore, or didn't do your chores, or sassed, or your room wasn't clean. Blah blah blah. You were spanked with a leather belt, more like whipped, because it had metal on the end, or we didn't eat. What I want to talk about is the stupid sick policy. In Japan it's polite to wear a mask if you're sick to avoid getting other people sick. My dad implemented that as a rule. Fine. Whatever. Weird, and I was made fun of for it, but okay. But the shitty part was we were confined to our rooms. If we were sick, food was quickly passed into the room once or twice a day, couldn't leave but to use bathroom, had to always wear a mask. Absolutely awful. There was nothing to do. We weren't allowed TVs in our rooms or often electronics in general, just for me because I'm a girl and my dad is sexist. Honestly, I had a really shitty childhood, and it's definitely caused a lot of problems. I'm still okay though. Like, I did great in high school, and I'm going to a state university on a huge scholarship, and I code and make art, so I'm good. But strict parents, am I right? I got a ton more awful stories, but I think that's what I hated the most. Not getting love/care when I felt like shit. That hurt.